Hey, what's up? Zach here, and today I've got the all-new Jordan Luka 4. Let's get into them. Now, to me, the Luka 4 is quite the departure from the Luka 3, but honestly, kind of more harkens back to the Luka 1, which I guess makes sense because keeps wearing the Luka 1s over the 2s and 3s. And as you'll see as we go through the layers of the shoe, that becomes more and more evident that, seem to be the intention with these shoes to get him more back to, more of his favorite style of shoe. So to start off in the uppers, now number one, you've got the flight wire cables that go pretty much just right into the carrier foam, and then they loop around the lace eyelets. Now the lace eyelets are all reinforced with stitching, and then they're reinforced over top of that. Plus, like I said, they've got the flight wire going around it. What I noticed about this is even though you don't get a runner's knot, because the tongue is also pretty darn padded, especially in more of the proximal tongue, plus you get a pretty aggressive gusset, the lockdown on these actually pretty good, whether I had an orthotic in them or not. Heel slippage was very mild. If I didn't have an orthotic in there, it was barely there. If I had an orthotic, it was mild. As you go around the heel counter and ankle collar, the padding does get pretty bulky. It's enough to keep you into the shoe. The one thing you don't get that you get in some Jordan brand and Nike shoes is you do not get a double thickness heel counter. It is just a straight up heel counter. So there is that. Now you look at this thing on the breathability test, on the heat mapping, and I thought, when you take these out and look at them, they are pretty substantial. There's a lot of padding that goes into kind of the quarters of the shoe and then even into the forefoot of the shoe. There is a lot of padding. However, they only heated up 82.5 degrees, and even using new heat mapping on that, that is pretty good. That is actually on the better end of that. The tongue does have some, porous holes in it. It's just, the materials just do a pretty decent job handling that heat. The insole on these things actually looks like Nike Grind too, which is pretty cool. All in all, most Nike shoes do a pretty good job handling heat. On the breathability mapping though, as you can see, fog is not really getting out of anywhere besides the sides of the tongue. So remember, there is still padding in there, so I think they're gonna hold on to moisture a lot more than they hold on to heat. Another thing on the upper durability test though, 10-second tie grit sandpaper, I think this was the most impressive thing. Yeah, the burr scuffs it up, but doesn't really do much to it, which I thought was pretty impressive given how, well these things, like I said, push heat out of the shoe. Now you do have exposed Cushlon out there, so you're still gonna tear that up, and the tread is pretty sticky, so as we'll see in the outsole section, these are still indoor shoes, but I guess you can get the EP or the PF version of these. I think they'll be okay on outdoor courts if you're not a dragger or slider, because if you are still in outdoor courts, even with the beefier outsole, you're still gonna tear through this exposed Cushlon. All right, but getting into the midsole teardown, I think I've just gotten used to feeling Cushlon 2.0 and now 3.0 a lot, because the Cushlon in this feels pretty darn dense and springy. It almost feels like a pretty dense, springy, injection molded Phylon, but it is Cushlon. This thing also has a bottom-loaded zoom unit in the forefoot. Now it is cased by the ISO plate, which just goes from medial to lateral in the shoe. It does stay isolated. ISO plate, and there you go, some play on words. It does stay isolated to the forefoot. You can see it, they have ISO here on the outside of the carrier, which I guess does, maybe a little bit. It does look a little bit more like window dressing, but that ISO plate is in the forefoot. I kind of like this configuration where it's actually open to Cushlon in the middle, and you got the Zoom Air. No, you're not gonna get as much court feel with it, but it is nice to get some stability there in the forefoot of the shoe. There is a little bit of a lateral flange there, but not much. And we'll see in the fit section how Jordan brand gets away with that. But unlike the 3s where you got that fat lateral flange and you have all outsole rubber, it's a really bulky forefoot. I like that personally for stability. Obviously, Luka didn't because he was going more with the design of the 1s, which this more mimics. Another thing on the bounce height test, got 38 centimeters in the rear foot. Like I said, it is pretty springy Cushlon, but then 38 in the forefoot. And that's, honestly, I wasn't too surprised because it's that Zoom Air unit on, the Cushlon's on top of it, so you're gonna get more of an influence from the Cushlon, plus that Zoom Air unit doesn't take up much real estate, right? So you got the ISO plate on top of it, so you got some influence there. So all in all, when you're up on the balls of your foot and when you are pushing into the shoe, it does spring to life. It would have been probably a little bit more springy, a little bit more responsive if the Zoom Air was bigger, not just that little rectangle. But for what I think Luka probably wants out of these shoes, I think it's a good match. And so as you can see in this midsole, maybe it's just coincidence, but it does appear to be that this is more harkening back to the 1s, getting it more kind of tuned to Luka's game, or just at least his preferences. And if you want to get your shoes tuned to your game and to your preferences, but don't have a company like Jordan Brand or Nike there to completely customize it for you, and you got to do it on your own and need some guidance, I am coming out with a comprehensive shoe customization ebook that has all of my tips and tricks from all the years that I've been customizing shoes for athletes, customizing orthotics for athletes. I leave nothing out of it. It is pretty much a brain dump of mine of everything about performance shoe customization. So if you want to get more information on that, how you can customize your shoes at home using very inexpensive materials, make sure you check out the link down below. All right, let's get into the outsole. All right, but getting into the outsole tread, it is a full-length tread pattern, which is really nice. It is herringbone, and basically it's just two tread sections that is basically broken up by the ISO plate. That's what creates the undulation in there. Now these things do not slip on the grip test ramp until 43 degrees. Just put your thumb on them, just kind of feel it, and it does feel pretty darn sticky. Thing is, that's static grip, but in terms of dynamic grip, yeah, before they start picking up dust, they stick like crazy. The grip is really good. You do have to continually wipe them down if you want to keep that grip up. But if you don't mind some tread maintenance on them while you're playing, or if you play on cleaner courts, yeah, they do give some pretty sure-footed grip. But if you do play on dustier courts, make sure either you're using some grip spray, something that's gonna reject some of that dust, or just make sure you got something to wipe them down with that is pretty reliable of getting dust off of some pretty tacky outsole tread. Now look at this thing on the speed ratio. They come in at a 2.81, shank score of 0.1 bumps it up to a 2.91. Not the heaviest shoes on the planet. The Cushlon is pretty dense. No, there is no midfoot shank. So yeah, you might start wearing through that. I think if you could have connected the ISO plate into a shank, then I think that 2.91 would really be kind of where these are. Like I said, I think when they're new, I think that is pretty accurate. As you start to break in and break down the midsole, I think that number just goes down and down and down and down and down, obviously. Now these things on the outsole durability test, 10-second tie grit sandpaper. I mean, the burr doesn't get a millimeter of damage on this. The durometer is actually pretty darn high. It comes in at a 19. I still wouldn't take them on outdoor courts because of the uppers and because, like I said, the tread is so tacky. I think if you keep them on indoor courts, as long as you don't drag or slide too crazily, yeah, I think they actually do pretty darn well. All right, but getting into the fit of the Luka 4, number one, these things have an 11-degree inflare, which is pretty just middle of the road, but they do have 5 degrees of resting eversion. That's what I was saying. Things don't have a huge lateral flange. I mean, there's a little bit of a clip flange here, so it is there, but the way these produce stability for ankle sprain protection is that they just seat you the opposite direction. They seat you everted 5 degrees. Now that goes to 9 degrees with loading. So these do have an additional 4 degrees of that. So we'll talk about that in a second, but these, like I said, these do put you pretty foot flat. Now in terms of length, they come in at 29 centimeters. They do have 9.4 centimeters of metatarsal width, 10.3 of toe box width, and a toe box taper of 27 degrees. They also have an angle of ascent in the forefoot of 9 degrees. So they're not completely flat to the ground. They are from the heel, pretty much into the distal forefoot though. So I'd say if you're a narrow medium foot, I can go true to size on these things. A 2E can go true to size. You don't have like any real lumps or bumps like a bunion or Taylor's bunion. I mean, I have these things true to my court shoe size and I was just fine. I had no cramping or anything. If you're a 2E, you want to go up half size, you can. They do run a hair long, but they lock down well enough to think you're okay. If you're a 2E and want to put an orthotic in them, yeah, but maybe you go up that 1/2 size as well. But if not, you want a little more performance, a little bit of weight reduction, like I said, you can try to break these in true to size for a 2E. Now, in terms of people I'd be recommending these for, yeah, I mean, they do hold orthotics okay, but in terms of like anything like tendonitis, flat foot pain, strain, things like that, they do seat you pretty low and pretty everted. So if you like that feeling of being low to the ground, that's great. If you liked the Luka 1, you'll probably like these. I mean, they're not exactly the Luka 1, but it has the same pedigree, the same design philosophy. If you like the feeling of a more low profile 4-foot leaflet, you're gonna like these in terms of like more of a, because like once you break these in, they do start to feel a little bit more buttery in the midsole. That Cushlon does start to break in a little bit. So you do get more of kind of that buttery feel, but with still a little bit more of a solid 4-foot. Said, if you're gonna want these to last the duration, you're probably gonna want to put even just a low profile orthotic in there, just so that the Cushlon has a little bit more load sharing in it. But yeah, I mean, honestly, like I said, you like Luka 1, I think you can at least give these a try and have some, expectation that you'll like them. To me, really anybody with straining type things in that midfoot, I don't think is gonna like them. I have a super high arched foot. I have a C-shaped foot, right? I loved them, you know, because they kind of matched where I was. So even without an orthotic, I really like these. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Honestly, in terms of Jordan brand right now, yeah, I'd say these are probably my favorites right now. Yeah, for sure, these are my favorites. And you know, Luka 3s I really liked. I still like the Luka 3s a little bit more than this. I think I'm in the minority on that because I love the stability in the forefoot of those. Yeah, I would say in terms of Luka's signatures, I'd say it's the 3, the 1, the 4, and then the 2. So yeah, I did like these. And I do like it that you can see in these that it does appear to be, at least there's some input from him just from what you saw from the 3s, and he was wearing the 1s, and now you see the 4s and they much more resemble a 1. So I do like that. I would love to see what's inside his real shoe. They're just way too expensive right now for me to cut open. But if they do go down in price, I will be a buyer on those. And if you do want to see a deeper dive into why I thought Luka continued to play in the 1s versus the 2s and 3s, I did make a whole video of that I'll link up above here, and make sure you subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.